Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm Art Crumry. I'm the Vice President of the Norwood Park Historical Society. I don't recognize, is anybody here for the first time? The first time? Okay, what's your name? Bernie. And anybody else? Okay, good. Well, we're competing with the Democratic National Convention, so that's a tough act to compete with. But I have a personal interest in this stuff because I'm adopted, as I was telling our speaker. Welcome to the Historical Society. You've got information on your seats. Consider membership if you're not already a member. We've got some exciting programs coming up. Maybe you could talk, I talk about the next speaker because I'm not so familiar with the next speaker, but I am familiar with Stems and Signs. September 21st is a very exciting program. It's our fundraiser, our preeminent fundraiser, wine tasting, beer tasting out on the lawn. We've always been very lucky with the weather, and it's so much fun. And we're going to have a very good folk singer this time. His name is Wayne Faust. He sings a tearjerker about Norwood Park because he's from Norwood Park. So consider joining us on September 21st. It's a great event. So I'm going to turn this over to Rich, who will tell us about the speaker and tell us about the next speaker too.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rich Lindberg, and it's my pleasure to be with you. Laura and I plan the programs for the Norwood Park Historical Society. I've been a member for many years, and it is arguably one of the most vibrant community historical societies in Chicago. And I can tell you, Wayne Faust, who will be performing on the lawn, Wayne and I went to Taft. We graduated together in 1971, and he always proudly boasts that he's never worked a day in his life because he's been so busy traveling the country entertaining with homespun humor, folk music, and I think the greatest, funniest thing he does is he says, well, I've been trying so hard to publish original songs and lyrics, and then we have this song, Batman, 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 and that's kind of a sampling of his humor. But if you can attend that, you'll meet Wayne. He lives in Colorado, and he spends much of his summer and winters on the road performing. Now, with regard to our next speaker next month, we're going to have Ursula Bielski with us. She's well-known, well-established in Chicago as the preeminent ghost hunter in the city. Ursula has a company where she's done bus tours. She helped found a publishing company called Claremont Press. She is a true believer, and she'll have many interesting stories. And since this is September, we're getting very close to Halloween, and I think that you'll really enjoy hearing some of her stories. Which brings us to our program tonight on the third night of the Democratic National Convention. So I think that the Democrats owe us something for taking all of the rest of our audience away, but so be it. With genealogy television shows and the popularity of DNA testing through 23andMe and, for example, and other programs, the desire to know one's family history has become more and more popular. I think, as we all know, we probably all have experiences working with it. How does one really get started with genealogical research? This is a very common question, as more and more people, through sheer curiosity, want to find out about their family origins. It is our great pleasure to have with us this evening Kathy Meade, a real expert on the subject. In this presentation, titled The Genealogy Journey, Discovering Your Family History, Kathy will outline the basic steps and tools to begin your research. She will show how to get started with research and treasures that can be uncovered. And for some of you who might have done that, you know that some of the information is out there, and it's often very startling and remarkable. Kathy Meade is the North American representative for Archive Digital AD/AB. This company offers online access to newly photographed color images of the Swedish church books and other historical records. She has been working with Swedish genealogy for nearly 20 years. Ms. Meade serves on the advisory board for the Swedish American Genealogy Research Center at the Swedish American Museum on Clark Street and Foster in Chicago. She volunteers at the museum and the Arlington Heights Memorial Library, helping patrons with their Swedish genealogical research. Previously, Kathy worked for a multinational information technology company for over 20 years. She lived 10 years in Europe, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Norway. And it was really through our Swedish connections that I made contact with Kathy. I was writing my Swedish family memoir, Whiskey Breakfast, and she was so instrumental in helping me go back 3 generations. And so Kathy's a good friend, and I'm very pleased and honored that she's with us tonight. Kathy?
Well, thank you very much. Before I start, I just want to say that I actually entered genealogy not by tracing my family history, but through a business opportunity. So when I came back to the States after living in Europe, I took an early retirement from this multinational company. And I actually played for a couple of years, but then I decided I needed to work for financial reasons, but also I really was too young to retire at that point in time. So I actually got an opportunity to work with a Swedish company that was trying to enter the US market. And the company was called Genline. And they were the very first company, this is in 2003, they were the very first company that had online digital Swedish church books. They were actually they were digitizing the scanned microfilms. But they were the only game in town. And got interested in, they only had a handful of customers. But then I talked to some of these customers before I took the job, and they were all saying, they were just passionate about this product. So that I ended up joining that company, and I actually worked for them until 2010, and they were purchased by Ancestry. And during that time, I traveled around with the CEO. We went to 25 different states talking about Swedish genealogy and also how to use the product. Then at that time, when I was released, Ancestry, I didn't want to really work for Ancestry, and I took a year off, but meanwhile, this company, Archive Digital, came to me and asked me if I would help them enter the market, and they actually had a better product. And I said, well, I really want to take a year off, and they said, okay, if you want to hire someone else, that's fine. Well, they waited another year until I was ready to work. So I have been working with them, and I'm sort of cutting back a little bit now, but I write the blog. And I also travel around the country giving speeches for them. So, and I go to Sweden and see them too. So anyway, that's my background as far as genealogy. So what I want to do is first of all start off with what is genealogy? And then how do you get started? And then I'm going to do a case study. And it's going to be with Buzz Aldrin, who was the second man who walked on the moon. And he had Swedish heritage. And so we're going to look at some US records, and then also we're going to jump the pond and look at the Swedish records. And then I want to point out just very briefly a couple of future trends that are going on in the genealogy world today. So what is genealogy? And when I started this in 2003, this is exactly where I was. Even though I had this business opportunity, I knew what genealogy, but I really didn't know anything as to what I'm going to be talking to you about today. But according to the Oxford Dictionary, genealogy is defined as an account of one's descent from an ancestor or ancestors by enumeration of the intermediate persons of pedigree. So people start creating a family tree. But even family history, which is a little bit broader, and this is from Wikipedia, family history is broader and covers not just lineage, but also family, community history, and biography. It makes your ancestors really, you can really see the flesh and bones. And I discovered this is really what people want. They want more than just names, dates, and places. They really want to know their ancestors, what they did, where they came from. So why do you do genealogy? And genealogy has become very popular, especially in the last years. More people are doing it, especially family history. People are interested in their family history. You know, I travel all over the United States. I've traveled in Europe. I've talked to a lot of taxi cab drivers from all over the world. And it's amazing. People will talk about their family history. I don't care if they're from, you know, Senegal in Africa, or they're from Lebanon or whatever. They all have stories about their family history. So, but as doing the actual research, that's another story. I don't know how many people really want to do all the detailed research when you get to that point. But so people do it because you really want to know who they were, you know, who they are. They want to know about their family. Also, if they discover, you know, if they're from Brazil or if they're from Mexico or Germany, they want to know more about the history of that country. They want to know why their ancestors came here. What was the life in the old country? And then also to widen their family. I get a lot of requests from people in this country wanting to meet living Swedish relatives, and also vice versa. Now myself, I will help people find them, and I found names and addresses and telephone numbers for people. I don't contact them. I will give them to that person and say, you do it yourself, because that's their choice to do it. But I have done that. And then also some people for health reasons, especially people who are adopted. They may want to know more about their background as far as health. So what do genealogists do? Well, they research and trace family roots. And they seek sources such as the birth, marriage, and death records, you know, the original records, census records, military records, probate records. And then they document it and usually put it in a family tree chart, and then from there they may expand it into a book or a narrative. So if you're brand new to genealogy, where do you go to learn more about genealogy? And there are online sources. You can join a genealogy society, or many of the libraries have beginning genealogy classes, like the Newberry Library, or there are genealogy conferences that you can attend. And the largest organization for family history and for preserving documents is the Family History Organization in Salt Lake City. I can tell you, when I started this in 2003, I had never heard of family history. I was aware of the Mormons, but I had no understanding about family history. Family history is, you know, they have that library in Salt Lake City, and then they have family history, they're now called Family Search Centers, all over the world. And there's lots of them here in the Chicago area. There's a really nice one in Wilmette. And they provide help, you know, people doing their researching their family history. They've gone all over the world for more than 70 years and maybe longer, really photographing all these documents, you know, countries all over the world. And for many years they were on microfilm. And about 10 to 15 years ago, they all of a sudden realized that the microfilm wouldn't stay, it wouldn't be preserved forever. So they started actually scanning the microfilm and digitizing it. So this microfilm, they have a cave outside of Salt Lake City. And I've gotten to know quite a few people there at the Family History. I've been invited to a lot of private tours there. But has anyone ever been to the Family History Library in Salt Lake City? Okay, I mean, if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. It is just a fantastic place. But they also have this site, FamilySearch.org. And they have a research wiki. And the research wiki tells you how to research in places all over the world. So that's really some of the first places you should go to. Like here's an example of Massachusetts, and it tells you a little bit about it. It's how to get started with Massachusetts research, online genealogy records. They will tell you about other types of records. Over there are the different record types. So that's how to get started. Here's another example. This is for Mexico. And usually for the different countries, there will be a map. They will break it down into the different areas, and sometimes they will get down into the village level, telling you how to research for that. So if you want to do research in place, just go to that FamilySearch.org to see if you can find that place to get the resources. Also, FamilySearch has webinars, and they have webinars every month, and they're free, and they're live, but they record them, and so they're available, and there are several years of webinars that are out there that you can go and look at. And all these webinars are professionally done, they're professionally edited, they are top-notch. So you can go there to learn about many different subjects. See, these are some, they had some in August, and they have some coming in September. In September, there's going to be one on finding your ancestors' origin story, strategies for U.S. immigration research. Another one is forgotten wives, mothers, and spinsters, tracing women in U.S. research. So those are some of the topics that they have. Another place you can go is to go to YouTube. And I just put in genealogy research, and you'll get lots and lots of videos showing you how to do research. And they're different, it's mixed quality. But another site that's very good that I recommend is Legacy Family Tree Webinars. This is a subscription site. It's $49 a year. However, you can get on their mailing list, and when they do the live presentation, that is free. And usually it's free for 1 week. And then after that, the webinar goes behind the paywall. And if you have a subscription, you can view them all the time. But they have over 2,200 webinars. And there are some of the top speakers of genealogy are included in those webinars. Okay, then you can join genealogical societies. And that was another thing when I started doing the research. I was amazed at the number of genealogical societies. I mean, there were close to 1,000 in 2003 just here in Illinois. So, but anyway, there's a National Genealogical Society, which is a national one. It's called NGS. They usually have a conference once a year. Last year it was virtual. They're talking about it maybe again in person, I'm not sure. There used to be two. There used to be the NGS and the FGS, but now the FGS is merged into the NGS. There's also state ones. The New York Genealogical and Biographical Society, that's a great one if you have New York ancestry. Illinois State Genealogy Society. Then there's ethnic groups. There's like the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, the Polish Genealogical Society of America, and then local ones, Chicago, and CAGNY, which is the Computer-Assisted Genealogy Group of Northern Illinois. And then also, this is another one in the Chicago area, South Suburban Genealogical and Historical Society. And they have all the Pullman railway records at that particular society on the south side. So, I mean, but there's many more genealogical societies in the Chicago area. Okay, I mentioned that you should go to a library if you want to learn more about genealogy. Here are the libraries, some of the libraries that are considered in the top 20. FamilySearch is always considered #1. No matter what survey you look at, they are always considered #1. I mean, they have, I don't know how many floors, it was 5 or 6 floors, all kinds of records. And also, their researchers there are top-notch at that Salt Lake City. So, for instance, they have the Nordic desk, and they're top-notch. Then they also have somebody that specializes in Germany. Someone specializes in Mexico. So you can talk to them. Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne is considered #2. And then after that, there's the New England Genealogical Society in Boston, which is very nice. And that, if you have New England ancestry, that is one that I would recommend. There's NARA in Washington, D.C. There's one in Clayton Library in Houston, Texas. And the Midwest Genealogy Center in Kansas City is very nice. It's like 4 floors near Independence. And then, of course, here in Chicago, we have the Newberry Library, which specializes in genealogy research, especially Chicago research. It is a private it's a research center. You can't check out any books, but it is free to go in there. You just get a membership card and you're able to go in there. And they do have people that specialize in genealogy that work there that you can get help from. Okay, conferences. And there's lots of conferences. And I mentioned the NGS one, but the largest conference is Roots Tech in Salt Lake City. Has anyone heard of Roots Tech? Okay, they hold this every year in Salt Lake City. usually the end of February or the 1st of March. Next year it's going to be the 1st of March. It's a worldwide conference. People come from all over the world to it. Before the pandemic, 30,000 people attended it with 200 vendors. And then during the pandemic for 2 years, it was virtual. It started again in 2023 and also this year. And I have spoken at quite a few of the conferences over the years and been a vendor. This year they said there were 15,000 people there. I'm not sure if it was, but there were still, now people are coming back out to it. And there probably were about 130 vendors. And the vendors are, from all over the world. There were vendors from China, vendors from Japan, different countries. Also, there are some specialized conferences. There's one for the German Genealogy Society, and that's going to be in Columbus, Ohio. And again, that one draws people from Europe and also the United States. And then here in Illinois, there's the Illinois Genealogical Society always has a conference once a year. It's going to be on October 26th, I think it is, or 28th. Anyway, the last of October on a Saturday. It's in Joliet. It's just a one-day conference. It used to be 2 days. Now, what I am noticing now, before the pandemic, there were lots and lots of conferences. And sometimes I was attending a conference almost every week in a different city. Now, what's happened, since so much has gone online, a lot of people are realizing it's much better, just they can view it online. They don't need to spend money for travel expenses or hotels going to a conference, and they tend to be a little bit more particular, or they may just go to the local conferences. DuPage County has one every year in February that draws about 250 people. And then there's Cagney's having one in Palatine, I think in September. So there's a lot of conferences that go on. But those are good places to learn about genealogy, but also to meet other people who are interested in genealogy. Okay, so this is where we are. Those are some places that you can go to learn more about what's out there. But you want to do your family history. So how do you start? Well, there's personal sources and also public sources. The first thing you need to do is start with yourself. And then write down everything you know about your parents. And then if you know your grandparents, write everything you know. Just write it down. Start building a family tree. Then interview family members. Now, what a lot of people say, always interview the older members. But it might be at a point in your life where there are no older members around. What I suggest doing is just maybe talking to cousins, because some of them might have some old documents lying around. Other people in the family. Just interview as many people in the family that you know and see if they have any information. And then you gather all that information. Sometimes people have an old family Bible lying around. And you'd be surprised, sometimes there are actually family trees in those family Bibles. Might have some old letters, postcards, even photographs and diaries. And then some people actually have vital documents in their records, like birth, marriage, and death certificates. My father lived to be 98 years old, and he died in 2015. And he told me, I really know a lot about his life, and I knew that he had been in the Merchant Marines during World War II. I had never seen, because the way it worked in World War II is you would sign on a ship, and then you go off, and then you had to sign on another ship. That was what was the requirement was. And he had after his death, I found all these these sign-offs from these different ships. So things that, you don't know, even though I knew a lot about him, he talked a lot, but I didn't know about that. Okay, so you've got all this information, you've got documents, but now you need to start maybe verifying more information because you don't have all the details. So you need to maybe go out and search for birth, marriage, and death certificates. The federal census records. If you have an ancestor that came in 1875 and they lived until 1925, go and look for the 1880 census, the 1900 census, the 1910 census, the 1920 census. Unfortunately, the 1890 census was destroyed, so you can't look at that one. But gather as many as you can. If they lived in a state that had state census records, look at that state census record. The World War I and World War II draft registration records give a lot of information. U.S. naturalization record, primarily the application for naturalization. If you can find that, that's a great source. Court records, wills, obituaries from newspapers, a lot of detail there. And then also tombstones. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to get as many facts about this person that you're trying to research. You want their birth date, their name, their death date, as much as possible. So where do you research? Where do you do this research trying to find the documents? Well, in the past, and I would say, if you were to go back to 1995, so maybe 30 years ago, what you would have to do is you would have to travel to libraries, go to archives, go to distant places, or write letters to people. And then you would view documents at a family search center, or go to Salt Lake City, or go to someplace in Europe. And if you went to a family search center, you'd be actually looking at microfilms or microfiche. And even up until 2000. But today, you can research, and there's so much that you can find online. And you can sort of research any place where you can have access to the internet. View original documents online. However, saying that, there is still a lot that has not been digitized. A lot. I mean, so you may end up having to go to a local historical center or a local archive. But it's really changed a lot since I even started in 2003. Okay, so what are the big 4 online genealogy sites? Family Search is huge, and that is free. You can do that out of your home or go to a library, wherever. Ancestry is also very large and has documents from all over the world. However, it is a subscription site. However, most libraries in North America do have a subscription. So you can actually go to a library to use it. You do have to go to the library. You can't view it remotely from home. And then there's another, MyHeritage, which is sort of probably a competitor to these other sites. It is also a subscription site. Some libraries have it. If they do have it, they usually allow their patrons to actually view it from home. I don't think I haven't checked in the last couple of months or the last year. Chicago Public Library did not have it. The Arlington Heights Library does have it, so patrons there can actually view it from home. And then Find My Past, if you have ancestry from England or Scotland or Ireland or Australia or New Zealand, that is a very good site to go to. It is a subscription site. And also, they are also now beginning to photograph Catholic records. It's like they just added the Catholic Church records from Philadelphia. So if you have, those are becoming a little bit more online. Okay, and then there are specialized countries. There's Germany, there's Archeon, which is a subscription site. And there's another, and that specializes primarily in German Protestant records. Oh yeah, Archeon is A-R-C-H-I-O-N. And then there's another site called Matricula, which I don't have on the slide, M-A-T-R-I-C-U-L-A, and these are .de. Archeon is a subscription site, Protestant records. Matricula has many Catholic records from Germany and Austria. Okay, and then there's a site called Genealogy for French records. And then we'll look at Archive Digital, that's Swedish records. And then Norway has the Digital Archives, which is a great site, which is free. And there's sites in Denmark, there's sites for other countries too. Finland has quite a few sites. So this is just an example for other sites. And the Family Search org that I pointed to, as far as a wiki, that's going to point to you what online sites are available for that particular country. Okay, so we're going to do a case study. And we're going to do it for Buzz Aldrin. He was the second person to walk on the moon, Apollo 11 in 1969. And his paternal grandparents immigrated from Sweden, and they settled in Worcester, Massachusetts. Now, a lot of people think of Swedes coming to the Midwest, to Chicago, to Minnesota, Midwest. Worcester, Massachusetts in 1920, 20% of the population had Swedish heritage. So it's okay, so just pretend that you're Buzz Aldrin. And his name was Edwin Aldrin. He was born in 1930. So you write down your name, and then he writes down his parents. His father was Edwin Eugene Aldrin, born in 1896, and he was born in Worcester. And his mother was Marian Gladys Moon, and she does not have Swedish heritage. So we want to actually trace the Swedish side of the family. So we're going to start with what we know. We're going to look at Edwin Eugene Aldrin. We're going to start doing research for him. He was born in 1896 in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I'm just going to show you a couple of records I found for him. I'm going into Ancestry, but I could have gone into Family Search, which is a free site. I could have gone into MyHeritage, but I happen to have Ancestry. So I put in Edwin Aldrin, his name. I put his birth year of 1896, and I put Massachusetts as his birthplace. And I got quite a few hits. But the one I was mainly interested in was the 1900 US Census. And on here, it has Edwin at the top. That's the father. He was age 4 at that time. But go down further, it's the whole family. And his father is Charles Aldrin. Now, when they transcribed it, they indexed it incorrectly. They spelled it A-L-D-R-I-N-E. It should be A-L-D-R-I-N. But it says he's 33. But I clicked on that name, and here I'm getting more information about the father. And the father says he was born July 1866. I have a month and a year. Immigration year 1891, marriage year 1888, born in Sweden. So I have a little bit of information about him. And now, a census record, you have to be a little bit careful because these are secondary sources. So the information may or may not be correct. So that's why you have to gather as much information and then you start comparing. Also in Ancestry, there was actually an immigration record from Sweden, from the Swedish church books, and it had Carl Johan Aldrin. And his name was, Charles or Charlie. That's the Americanized name for Carl. Charles is not a Swedish name. So Carl Johan Aldrin, we have a birth date of July 7th, 1866. That's matching. Then it says the birthplace of Värmland, Norra Rhoda, Stjärnfors. I happen to know that Värmland is a county in Sweden. Whether that's the correct birth parish, I'm not sure, but I have that information there. So that's going to help me jump the pond. And then this is Find a Grave, and I didn't show the picture of the gravestone, but as Carl Johan Aldrin, this time it's spelled with a C. One time it was spelled with a K. Because in Sweden, they didn't have standardized spelling until the beginning part of the 20th century. So a lot of letters like C's and K's, or F's and V's, they were interchanged. So even though Carl on one record might be with a C, another record a K, it could be the very same person. So it says male, born July 7th, 1866. So we got that twice. And then we have his death date. So we're ready to jump the pond because we want to find the Swedish records for this Carl Johan Aldrin, the grandfather. So how do you do research in another country? Well, usually you should get an atlas, understand the geography of that country. Also, maybe look for a dictionary, in this case, Swedish English, or maybe sometimes you can find a Swedish genealogical dictionary. And then also go to the Family Search wiki to find out if there's any unique things in the research that you need to be aware of, like such as naming conventions, or maybe the alphabet. And then you need to find out what are the types of records, and where can you find them. So here I've gone to Family Search Wiki to find out more information to how to do research within Sweden. And Sweden is actually in Northern Europe. The capital is Stockholm. Today the population is about 10.4 million, and the size of the country is about the same size as California. Now you would be I hate to tell you how many times, when I lived in Sweden, I would come back and I said, well, I'm working and living in Sweden. Oh, you must go to the Alps all the time. So many people think they would confuse Sweden with Switzerland. So, okay, now this is the way Sweden was divided, primarily up until about 1970. There's been a few changes since then. But for doing genealogical purposes, this is sort of the key map. It's divided into counties. The country, 24 counties. Like in the US, we have 50 states, but there is 24 counties. And then each one of the counties are divided into districts or hard. And that's where you find the court records and the probate records. But then also the counties are divided into parishes. And there are over 2,500 parishes within Sweden. Quite a few. And that is important because that's where the church records are. So you need to know the parish, and then the district is court records, and at the county are tax records. So in order to jump the pond for Swedish research, you really need to know your Swedish ancestor's name, and ideally, the Swedish name. John Johnson is not going to do it. And you need to know that parish. Now, there's more indexing that's been done in the last probably 5 to 10 years. It's made it a lot easier. But when I gave presentations 10 years ago, I would have told you had to have that parish name. But now it's getting a lot easier. And also a significant date, such as a birth date. So what do we know? Well, from the 1900 census, it had Charles Aldrine. And then on the other records, we had Carl Johan Aldrin, one spelled C and one K. Birth date, 1900 census, July 1866. The other two records, July 7th, 1866. Birthplace on the Sweden on the 1900 census. And then we had Norra, Rhoda, Värmland, Stjärnfors. Värmland, I know, is a county. Okay, so what are the key set of records? When you jump the pond within Sweden, the first set of records that most people look at are the Swedish church books, because they are so complete and contain so much information. And there are more books than the Big Five, but people call the genealogy books the Big Five. Birth and baptism, marriages, deaths, and then these household congregation books. This is what's so unique about Sweden, and also they have them in Finland, because Finland was part of Sweden until the beginning part of the 1800s. But these household congregation books are like an inventory of everyone living in the household. And they were updated every single year. And the book might cover like 5 years or 10 years. So in the information, you'll have the name of the person, their birth date, sometimes the marriage date for the head of the household. If they moved in, that would be shown. If they moved out, that would be shown. Sometimes some special comments. And then also, and then we have the moving in and moving out records. But with the household congregation books and the vital records, birth, marriage, and death, you can actually sometimes trace a person from birth to death or birth to immigration, knowing exactly where they lived every single year. In this country, we have census records every 10 years. Now, the books actually start in the 1600s, and they go up until 1991. Within Sweden, there is a law that prohibits records younger than 70 years from being published online. So the cutoff year is 1952, or 1953 now. So you're going to find records online from the 1600s up until about 1950. So that, and we'll look at some here in a minute. Okay, where do you find these church books? Well, the original books are in regional archives within Sweden. And the online sources, lots of places now for Swedish church books. Because when I started out in 2003, GenLine was the only game in town. Okay, now Archive Digital has got the newly photographed colored images and lots of indexes. We're indexing a lot of records now. And that is a pay site. The National Swedish Archive site is scans of the microfilm. It's a pretty complete site. It's free. The English interface is not as strong as Archive Digital, but they do have some, and it's a very good site. If somebody wants a free site, that's the one I recommend. Okay, Ancestry had the scans of the microfilm. That's the old GenLine records. Then Family Search, they went and actually, photographed these records or microfilmed these records back in the 50s and 60s up until 1860. So now they've digitized them. They're online. However, unless you're Mormon, you can't really view them at home. You have to go to the Family History Library or Family History Center to see them. And then MyHeritage has household congregation records. These are Archive Digital images. It's related to a partnership that we had with them, but there are no vital records on MyHeritage. So that's fine. Okay, so we'll go to Archive Digital for our case study here. And this is the English site, the homepage, Find Your Swedish Ancestors. And within this site, we're going to start looking. First, we're going to look for the birth record for this Carl Johan Aldrin. And when you're doing Swedish research, usually we recommend looking for the birth record of the person you're researching. That's number one step for Sweden. And within Archive Digital, there's two ways of searching. There's the archive search and index search. Archive search is actually searching for an archive, like a parish archive, or maybe a court archive, or a military regiment. And then index search is name searching on different types of records. Okay, Archive Digital is in the process of indexing all of the birth, marriage, and death records from the earliest times up until 1900, 1920. It's a work in progress. Right now, they've completed all of the birth and marriage records between 1750 and 1840. They're indexed by name, and there's a transcription, a partial transcription, and a link to the original record. And for the death record, 1750 to 1799, and in the household books, 1800 to 1947 for all of Sweden. So they are really working on this. But right now, his birth record has not been indexed by name. So I'm going to have to go back to the old way of searching. I'm going to have to find the archive, the parish archive, and find the book and browse through it. And this is a way you would have to do it on the other sites. Archive Digital is really the only site that really has some name indexes. So what I'm doing is I'm going to the archive search. I selected parish congregation. Since I saw Varman, I'm clicking on that county. Now I get 98 parishes within Varman. I looked for Sharnfors, it's not there. But I saw Norra Rota was in that record. So I'm going to try Norra Rota Parish. I'm going to open that volume, or that archive for Norra Rota. And there's 119 books for that particular parish. Lots of records. But I'm looking for, I want to find a birth record for 1866. So I open a book, and it's 1861 to 1888, and I'm looking for that birth record. I open the book, and then it's organized in chronological order. So then I go to 1866, and then I'm going to look for July 7th. It's down there at the bottom. Okay. All right, this is in Swedish. When I started this, people would say, well, are the records in English? The original records are always going to be in the country of origin. Is it name searchable? And 20 years ago, in 2003, 21 years ago, it was not name searchable. There was a methodology. You would go in and do it just the way I showed you right now. And then I would come up, there's techniques, there's some books that you can use that can help you identify what the common words are used in birth records all the time, and sort of what the format is. But now so for instance, on this record here, it's number 105. We've got a birth date of July 7th, a baptismal date of July 15th. There's an entry in the male column, it's a male child. Child's name is Carl Johan. And then we got the parents, and it says Smed, S-M-E-D. That means blacksmith. And Jan H. Aldrin. That's why he doesn't have a name like, he was more of a professional, a blacksmith. He doesn't have Johansson or Anderson or Hansen. He doesn't, and then his wife was Brita Ersdottir. And then Scharnfors is the village that they're living in. And then after that, it actually has, and the mother is 36 years old. And then down here, we've got the baptismal witnesses, another blacksmith, Olaf Trasberg, and his wife, Anna Olsdottir. So now that we've actually found, jumped the pond, we've verified the birth date, we've verified the birthplace, but now we know the parents' names. So our next step is to actually look for the household books. And in the old way of doing it, I would have to go back to the archive and look for the household book that covered 1866, go to a name index in the front of the books for Scharnfors, go to that page, and then browse it. But now, within Archive Digital, all I have to do is I go to the population of Sweden, which is 1800 to 1947. These are all household congregation books for those years, for all of Sweden, have now been indexed by name. Now there are some books prior to 1800 that have not yet been indexed. And they'll probably be next year. They're looking at it by 2026 to have those indexed. So I put that in a simple search, and then I decided I want to make sure for the first name, I put Carl, but I put K-A-R-L, and then I have a line, and then Carl, C-A-R-L, special character. So it will look for both spellings. I got 10 records. All 10 records, they start 1861 to 1897. They are all his records from the time he was born until he immigrated. It's one search. In the past, it would have been me looking at 10 books, browsing through 10 and browsing. It would probably be, even if I were really fast, probably 2 to 3 hours. This is what's changed in the last few years. So on that first one, I click on the first one and I get an index record. And it's Carl Johan, has birth information, and you notice all the headings are in English. And birth location, parish, the place. There's a link to the source, to the original record, and then below it is all the members of the household, the parents and the siblings. I can click on them and get their index record. Yes. Yep. Yes. The question is that's their birth date? Yep. So here I clicked on it, and now I get the original record, and over here is the index record. I can compare to make sure that the index has been transcribed correctly. If I find an error, I go up there where it says correct. I can make a correction that is sent to Sweden, and if it is deemed to be a correct correction, it will be corrected usually within 2 to 3 business days. So but anyway, so what I find over here is Carl Johan, and it says Carl Johan, then it has his birth date, but it says some additional information is that he's a child from a second marriage. The father's first wife died the 9th of April, 1865, and then the father married Carl's mother, Brita Ersdottir, on the 23rd of March, 1866. Information is in the record, and then he was born on July 7th, 1866. So then I can go through and go forward.
Wait.
Yes, I know.
Okay. We're doing the math.
They're doing the math, and the math is correct. We're going to come into another record that you're going to see some more things. No, the math is correct. You'll see this all the time in Swedish records. So, okay, so anyway, we're going to go on. But then we're going to go to another record, and this is 1881 to 1885, because the record's in between. He's living with his parents. So, but this record is sort of interesting. Here's Carl Johan, but there's some special remarks over on the far right-hand side. And the literal translation is, he's requested that Anna Nilsson becomes his wife on the 15th of November, 1885. However, what's really interesting on this page is that Anna Nilsdottir down here in the second red box, and it says a Piga, P-I-G-A. That means that she was a maid. And this is very common. Above is Carl Johann, it's crossed out, but above it is his parents. This is the household, the main household. But a lot of these people would actually have additional household help. And if they were, women, young girls would be piga, P-I-G-A, or there might be some farmhands, drang, D-R-A, with 2 dots above it, N-G. And you'll see them listed. So here, this Anna Nils daughter has her birth date, 1858, says that she moved into this household in 1883 from another place. But then there's also special remarks. It says Schurktagen and became Carl Johannes Aldrin's wife, 1885, 1511. Actually, it means betrothed. Really, it's betrothed versus marriage. But below this, it has an Ellen. And it has an O and an A with 2 dots above it. That means that Ellen was born outside of marriage. The mother was not married. And she was born the 3rd of July, 1885. Now, the Schurktagen, what that is, this was a tradition when Sweden, really up until about maybe the 1870s, 1880s, and later, birth was considered unclean in the Swedish tradition. So usually 6 weeks after the birth, there was a special ceremony at the church that the mother went to. And this is and then if the person was unmarried, usually they would be forgiven for sinning for having a child outside of marriage. However, in this case, and this happened a few months, it actually happened in November, and she was born a little bit longer. The father is acknowledging, Carl is acknowledging that he is the father. He's taking the responsibility and saying, we were betrothed. Actually, she is not illegitimate, but legitimate. Here is the birth record for Ellen. And you go here, and it actually has the 3rd of July, baptism. She was baptized on the 5th of July. And then Ellen, but above it, it originally had that O-A, but now it's crossed out. And then over here, the mother was Anna Nils daughter, but it had Piga, P-I-G-A, but it's been crossed out. And over there, above it, it says Festikvinna, which means betrothed. And down here, it just say, actually, it happened on the Schurktagen, November 15th. So they changed the records to show that the daughter was not an illegitimate because they were betrothed to be married, engaged to be married. So these are things that you find in these records. Okay, then this other record here, next one, this is sort of interesting. Anna Nils daughter is still living there. And anyway, at the top, number 1, is Carl Johann. He's crossed out. But over on the far right-hand side, it still says the same thing about this marriage in 1885. But it also says that he went to North America in 1886. And then this number 2 where I am, it got the same, it says that he returned from North America in 1887. And then there's a banns of marriage for the official marriage is announced there. And it says he's moving to Rowland Parish in 1889. Anna Nils daughter, it says, there's a special notes about that 1885 Schurktagen, but also saying of the banns, the official banns, and moving to Rowland in 1889. That first child, Ellen, died in 1889. And then there's another child, Anders Gustav Aldrin, who was born in 1888. So he was born in 1866. You mean 1885, where it says he got married in 1885?
The wife died.
Oh, okay. Carl was born in 1866. And that first record I showed you, the first household record, showed that he was the second child of his father.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, then here's Ellen's death record. And this is sort of a common death record. There's number 34. She died April 15th, 1889. Her burial date says that she's Ellen, daughter to Carl Johann Aldrin, a blacksmith, and Anna Nils daughter, his wife, in Scharenfors. And she was 3 years old, 9 months, 12 days. Says she was unmarried. I mean, I would think so at that age. And her cause of death was scarlet fever. So that was the death. This was actually Carl when he went to North America in 1886, and he left from Oslo, because Värmland is very close to Norway. And a lot of people from that area of Sweden, when they left, they actually left from Oslo. So this was the passenger ship manifest showing him going. It spells it Värmland, going to Worcester, Massachusetts. And then this is his arrival in New York, August 20th, 1886. And I found that, I think that was on Family Search. Okay, so finally they actually officially get married, Carl and Anna Nilsdatter. And this is a marriage record. They had the banns, it was November 5th. That was when it was announced at the church 3 Sundays before that they would get married. His name, Carl Johan Aldred, worker, Scharnfors. His birth date, Anna Nilsdatter, Pigga, her birth date. He was present, and the consent for the marriage, so her father probably gave the consent for the marriage at that Kyrkotagning back in 1885. And there was no other additional family present at the wedding. The marriage date was December 26, 1887. So in 1887, they're officially married. But they were betrothed, so any of the children born were official. Okay, the next one, they're in Ramnan. It just shows he's a blacksmith. Continue another record. This record is showing him, so they moved from Norwood to Ramnan, another parish, and then in 1891 they moved to another parish called named Krapa, and they have now another child, Emma Maria. And this record here says their names are all crossed out, and it says they're going to North America on the 9th of March, 1892. This is a day that they got permission to leave. So when anybody left a parish within Sweden, they had to go to the minister saying that they were leaving, even if they were moving to another parish within Sweden. They would get a certificate, more or less giving information about their birth, where they were living, their religious understanding, if they had, their moral character, if they were single, if they were free to marry, and then when they moved to a new parish, they would give that to that minister. It would be recorded in the books. If they moved to the North America, a lot of times it may have been discarded, but if they joined a Swedish American church, sometimes they gave it to that minister. And we do have some of those records online, for some of the Swedish American church records here in the United States. So anyway, that's the last household record for him. Here is showing the family. They left from Gothenburg, and that in Sweden there were several ports that people left from. The largest port was Gothenburg. The second one was Malmö, and then there was Stockholm and Helsingfors, but there were a few others too. But anyway, they left from Gothenburg on the 18th of March, 1892 on the ship Aristo. It says their final destination is Worcester, Massachusetts, and they were going to Hull, England. And then this is the ship leaving Liverpool. So they went to Hull, and then they probably took a train to Liverpool, and now you sort of see them on this particular manifest. And then lastly, they arrive in New York on March 30th, 1892. So here's his life. He was born in 1866. The first child was born in 1885. He went to North America in 1886. He returns to Sweden in 1887. The official marriage is in 1887, at the end of the year. Anders is born in 1888. There's Emma, born in 1890. We leave in 1892. And then this is actually a sort of the beginning of a family tree. And we could continue going back several generations. We probably could go back to the early 1700s for this family. Okay. Lastly, I'd like to just point out a couple of current trends. A lot of people are doing DNA testing. And that's because a lot of times people want to know their ethnic percentage. That's a big thing. Also family relationships, trying to find other people. Also, if a person is adopted, finding birth, information about their biological family. But what I'd like to show is what's happening with artificial intelligence. This is a death record in 1821. How many people think that they can read this record? Okay. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, if you get back in the 1700s, it's more. I mean, I can read this record, but I've been doing this for 20 years. And but within Sweden, at the National Swedish Archives site, they are actually doing a project on artificial intelligence. And so they're actually working on training these tools, these learning models, to actually read these old Swedish documents, the old handwriting, the court records. So I actually took this, and this is the tool. You put it into the HTR flow, and what I had to do was get a high quality image and then upload it to this particular program or tool. And then I got a script. Over here is on the left-hand side is the correct transcript. Over there is what AI did. However, even though they did a lot correctly, some of the most important information was wrong. They didn't do the parish correct. They didn't do the father's name correct. They didn't do the mother's name correct. And it says that he moved. What it's saying is this tenant, Jan Frostenson, who's from Gothenburg, born in Alakula in 1753 of Lussels parish in Skåne. And his father was Frosten Johansson, and his mother was the wife Toffa Jansdatter, and he lived there for 20 years. And then when he was at 20, he actually moved here to this particular parish in 1773 on April 4th. And then on April 4th, he married with his surviving widow, Pernilla, German's daughter. But they but it's still interesting how much of it was correct. But unfortunately, the most important facts were done wrong. And then over here is I put it through a chat GPT, and there's several different language translators. And it was a very good translation just by putting it there. But still, if I used that other one, it would not have been good. So that's why you have to be I think if you're using this particular tool for AI, you really almost need to know whether it's correct or not. But I can see in 3 or 4 years, it will probably be very good. And there's a lot of other types of documents within Sweden, like these court records and these estate inventories, which have got a lot of narrative. They provide a lot more information, and people will be really looking at those records more closely. I mean, people are already looking at the estate inventories because I give classes on how to read those, but you can use a formula to figure out how to read them. But when you get into the court records, they're much more narratives, and the writing is a little bit more difficult, but there's a lot of good information in them. So that's where it's going, and I'm sorry I went a little bit longer, but thank you for your time.
Okay, I have a question. This is mostly focused on Sweden, but are there the same sites that you use that you can use for other countries?
Yes. So, for instance, for German, they have different types of records. I'm familiar with Norwegian.
Okay.
Norway is very similar, except they don't have the household records.
Okay.
And it's a free site. Denmark also has a lot of records. Finland does too. And Finnish, actually a lot of the records within Finland are actually in Swedish. So, because Finland was part of Sweden up until the beginning part of the 1800s. Okay. And then, go ahead. Then also in Germany, I've looked at matricula. Again, it's getting to know what types of records they have. And matricula is quite nice for the Catholic records because they're the birth, marriage, and death, but they don't really have household records like they do in Sweden.
Okay. My specific dilemma is that I have the military records of my great-grandfather who is registered from England as Edgar Charles Graham, comes to America. And then his other military record that I have is Charles Edgar Graham, and we can't find him anywhere else.
Okay, for English records, might recommend Find My Past.
Find My Past?
Yes, that was,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Find My Past. And also there could be some on Ancestry and also My Heritage and also Family Search. You might want to contact the Family Search Library or go to a Family Search Center.
Yeah, I did both those things.
Oh, and they didn't
We
help.
can't find them.
Okay. But those are pretty good. But Find My Past is another site to go
Find
to.
My Past,
But I would,
okay.
okay.
Thank you.
And did not become United States citizens, but I need to find the registered alien information. Can you tell me how I can find that?
The registered alien information, I would actually probably go to Family Search Wiki,
Okay,
go there. And also, I would start there. I would also contact the Newberry Library.
I do have the identification number my grandmother used.
Oh, okay. Why don't you, I've never searched for it myself, but I would actually try to contact somebody at the Newberry Library and they could probably tell you where to go to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Art, you're gonna post this discussion on our website,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes. Let me ask people on Zoom if they have any questions here. Change the Zoom.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks everybody.